Today I'm going to be staking and stringing up some of my tomatoes. The baby's asleep, so I'm going to keep going until he wakes up. G'day there, I'm Dana from Pewokaka Valley Homestead, and today I'm going to be staking my outside tomatoes and stringing up my inside tomatoes, and I'm going to show you how I do both. And while I'm at it, I'll probably give them a bit of a prune as well. Now this is my garden bed of outside tomatoes. They're not as big as my inside tomatoes obviously, but they are growing and they even have a few first flowers on them, which is really exciting. This is a variety known as Subarctic Plenty, I think it is. And they're apparently really good at growing outside. So I'm going to grow these outside. As I'll show you later on, I usually string my tomatoes, so I don't have cages or anything for these ones, so I'm going to tie them to some bamboo posts that I've got. I'm going to start with this tomato here, and the first thing I'm going to do, I'm pretty sure these are not determinate varieties. I probably should check, but anyway, they're so far down I don't want a million of these branches. Each of these branches would turn into basically its own tomato plant sticking out of the original tomato plant. So you can take these and put them either in some water or even just stick them straight in the ground and they will grow more tomato plants. They root really easily. These are what they call laterals, and I'm just going to pinch these out. Pinching them out will increase the quality and quantity of the crop that you get. And then I'm actually going to snap off that lower branch as well. Basically, usually what you do is any branches below that first set of fruit, you get rid of them. I know it sounds a bit aggressive, but it's the best way of preventing them getting fungal things happening on their leaves. And then I'm just going to add a stake in right beside it. And you can get all sorts of fancy ties and clips and all sorts of things to go on here, but I'm just going to use some of the same string that I used for tying up my peas, partly because that's what I have, and partly because it's cotton and it's nice and strong. And you don't want to tie them too tightly, because as this bottom branch grows you don't want to cut off the circulation. So you just need it firm enough that it can attach to the post and not fall over. And that's all you need to do, and that will help protect the tomato plant from blowing over in the wind, and as it gets the heavy fruit set it will stop it falling over and making a big mess of the garden bed. So I'm just going to get on and finish staking the rest of these, and then once these are done I'll take you through into the tunnel house and show you how I use strings. When you're pruning out your tomatoes, just be sure to always leave at least one of these grow tips at the top. If you accidentally clip that out, you need to make sure that you leave one of the laterals to grow, otherwise your tomato plant will just stop where it is, finish fruiting and then die. So you always want to have at least one grow tip happening, but it's not the end of the world if you snap it off. It will grow laterals from the bottom, just be sure to let one of those grow. Now these tomatoes over here are probably still a little bit too small to stake, so I'm going to leave them for another day. You got to make the most of when the baby's asleep, right, and get the important stuff done first. Well, we're now in the tunnel house and it is really hot in here, so I'm just going to get done what I can get done before I melt. I'll show you what I do to tie my tomatoes up to strings. I find I use strings, one, because they're cheap, two, I use this nylon. It's like the same stuff that baling twine's made of. So it lasts and lasts and lasts. I have done it with cotton string before, but by the end of the season it had tended to sort of rot out and fall down, and then my tomato plants were all over the place. So I find that I just use this stuff and I leave it up every year, which does make it look a little messy. You can see the strings, they just hang out there all year round, and they do get the odd spider web happening. But I think environmentally and amount of work it takes wise, I think having them string up once and just reusing them is the best thing for us. So to do that, I've tried all sorts of other things. With it, I've buried the end of the string under the plant when I've been planting it. I have tried tying them onto the bottom of the plant. Both of those do work. It just means when it comes to hauling the tomato plants out at the end of the season, it's a lot more fiddly to get them out. So what I have discovered, if I can find one, here we go, found a whole bag. These tiny little clips, and when you get one to bend, the string goes in this pointy end here. You kind of catch it in the hinge, and then that just clips around your tomato plant, and I find they work really, really well. They cost like a cent each or something really, really stupidly cheap, and you can unclip them at the end of the season. Usually I just use one. Some people clip them all the way up. I usually just clip them at the bottom to anchor the string, and then I use the string to wind the tomato around to keep them upright. So I'm going to show you that on this first tomato here, which I think might be a sun gold cherry tomato, and it has already got its first little baby tomato on there. And I'm going to prune these as I go as well, so they might take a little bit longer, because I'm going to be pruning as well as hanging. Whew, and it's really hot, so I don't know how many I'm going to get through, but I'll at least show you one so you know how to tie up tomatoes using string. One of the first things I need to do is make sure that the string is actually hanging pretty much where I need it to be hanging, and luckily this one is. Put you on the ground, hopefully you don't fall on your face. All I do is pull the string nice and firm and work out roughly where it's going to clip. I usually try and clip underneath one of these big branches, and then I just leave that branch on, and then put the string right into the hinge, and then kind of keep the tension on it where you clip it around the bottom of the plant. And then you have it, it's attached, and then I just twist the plant around the string like that. And as the plant continues to grow, you just kind of twist it around, or twist the string around the plant, or whichever way works, and that will keep the plant upright mostly. Sometimes they get to the top and start falling over, but that's alright. For the most part, that'll keep it pretty well upright. It's a lot cheaper than buying stakes or cages. It's a lot easier. It gives you great access to the stem for pruning and picking and all that sort of stuff. Probably the only downside to it is they are a bit swayy, so if they do get heavy or the clip gets loose, they can bow out into the middle of the garden. But for the most part, I find that this works really well for us, and cheap, easy solution. And it means that we can plant our plants relatively closely together, because we're not having to worry about fitting cages in around them as well. Now unfortunately the wind's getting up, so it's getting a bit noisy in here, but most of my canning tomatoes are these Roma tomatoes, which are an indeterminate variety. So I am trying these this year. I've never tried them before, and so I'm going to try and string them, and when they get a little out of control, I'll wrap them with a little bit of that white string to help hold them up to this main black string here. Now the difference between indeterminate and determinate varieties are they're quite similar, but they're quite different. An indeterminate variety are the vines that will just continue to grow indeterminately, and they continually fruit. Now the reason I'm doing determinate Roma tomatoes for canning is because I am sick of harvesting 1 million kilos of fruit every day for weeks and weeks and weeks on end, and canning almost every day. So what I'm hoping is these will set fruit over about a 3 or 4 week period, and then they're done. The other difference is an indeterminate variety you keep to 1 litre. An indeterminate variety you keep to 1 litre, and you just they'll continue to fruit, and they can grow really, really long. Whereas a determinate variety is more like a bush, and usually they only grow sort of between belly button and face height. So you don't want to be pruning off all their laterals, because actually they use a lot of their laterals to make that bush, and if you trim those off you will miss out on fruit. So they are quite different, so it's quite good to know what you're actually growing, to know what to expect and how you need to treat them to get the most out of them. So I know that most of this first row here are Roma, except for that very first cherry tomato, but I have found a couple of them dotted in amongst my other tomatoes. So I'm going to do my best at growing them 2 separate ways, and we're going to see how this is my first year growing growing determinate ones for canning. I've grown determinate cherry tomatoes before, and they were great. They just made a massive bush, heaps of cherry tomatoes, and then they died. So we'll see how that goes. It's actually getting really, really hot in here, so I'm going to leave this until the evening when it cools down a wee bit. But I hope that's been helpful for you, showing you some different ways of tying up and stringing up tomatoes, and how to stake them if you're using stakes. If you found it useful, hit the like button. Follow along with the other Shed Wars bits and pieces. Shed Wars, it's simply a growing your own food competition. So if you see Shed Wars 21 around the place, we are members of that, and we're trying to grow the most amount of food as we can, and it's a competition. There's 2 teams with we're in Team Down Under, and there's also another Australian team called Team Southern Cross, and then there's going to be 2 teams in the States as well, in the Northern Hemisphere. So we're gunning for getting as much produce as we possibly can, and that includes getting a huge amount of canning tomatoes out of these. So if you want to follow along with that, I have got a Shed Wars playlist that'll pull this in as well, but you can just click on the hashtag Shed Wars 21, and it will take you to everybody else's video. So I really encourage you to get in on that and follow along with everybody's progress, and I will catch you in the next one.